As soon as I heard this guy rhyming, I was a fan. As the years went on, I got to know him and I found out that this is a guy with many talents. He's gone into videography, he's gone into photography, he's gone into spoken word. Let me introduce you to the guy who I have a lot of respect for and I have a lot of time for, HKB Finn.
I too am a big fan of your work. I'm not going to lie.
Thank you.
From the beginning, yeah, well, I mean, hardest working. I mean, we can go on, but people who know you anyway. So
As I got to know you, the person that you are, when I say, like, I've seen people with nothing, but I've seen people with nothing who are bitter and twisted.
yes, sir.
And I've seen you with nothing, but I've seen you with the humbleness, and I've seen you with a focus, I've seen you with understanding of other people. So just basically that ego let go turned you into a whole different person. Do you want to explain what made that change for you to just be like, you know what, don't need this?
No matter how tough you are as a fighter, you could be a good boxer, could be a good brawler. When there's like a few more people than you, you soon learn. No matter how tough you talk or how tough you act, everyone can get got. So you learn that, and also because I grew up in Jamaica, especially in the 1970s, I saw like real poverty, and I've seen people who have nothing, and I've seen like a man, for example, who lives on just an open piece of ground, and his house is made out of car parts. Like you live on dirt.
Yeah.
So it's like that level of like humility, and then going to school and seeing a dead person on a fence. So I think a combination of those things and understanding your place in the world, but also understanding like when you're making art, you got to make it from your heart. You do your best, and then you leave it to the people.
You know, you'll understand this. I'm sure some of the best things that you wrote in 15 minutes.
Less than sometimes.
How old were you when you started seeing like these people dead and, you know, people getting stabbed up and, you know,
Killed by
obviously
mobs.
we don't want to be dwelling on the negative, but
Sure.
just to paint a picture of why you became the lyricist you became.
I think the first bits of violence I started to see was probably around 1978.
Okay.
That's when you'd see like occasional things, because you know it's an island culture. Things happen, but I started to see like really graphic and intensive violence around 1978. From 1978 to about 1981, like consistently, thousands of people were dying every day all over the island. And at that time, we didn't even know. I didn't know that Jamaica was like part of a geopolitical game that was being played by between Russia and America. They launched a campaign where they brought weapons into Jamaica and they gave it to like young disenfranchised youth, and they told them stories that yeah, basically people from the next neighborhood they're trying to kill you, and then they went to another neighborhood because you're the people from that neighborhood are trying to kill you. So basically, people were fighting against each other under this ruse of local politics. But generally, it was just part of a bigger game because we had like food shortages, we had loads of like trade embargoes against the island during the period until the island elected an American-friendly government. But on the ground, people were just killing each other regularly. So people had to like tool up. So I remember one time I went to school, and I was in the playground with some of the other kids. I think I was like 12. And then a guy came up and he said, "What area are you from?" So I said, "I'm from Batbush." And he goes, "Yeah, Batbush man killed my mum." And then next thing you know, there was like 8 guys, and they were like pulling out all kind of weapons, like pistols, submachine guns, machetes. And like we're kids, we're at school. This is like primary school, it's not even secondary school. We're at primary school. And then this other kid that I knew from the area that the guy came from said, "Nah, he's joking. He's not from Batbush. He's from da 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 da." They was like, "Oh, you shouldn't run, make jokes like that." But the guy, yeah, he saved my life.
Coming to London, you must have been thinking like, this is heaven.
It is, for me, London is still heaven. And it's really interesting when I hear young people talk about how terrible London is. And it is for them. Like that's everyone's pain is different. Do you know what I mean? Like some rich person with a toothache think that it's the end of the world. And then some poor person with, probably going to get stabbed if he goes shop. It's the end of the world. But actually, life is good. So no matter how bad I think things are, the fact that I can feel bad is a good thing because I can still feel. And there's loads of people who have not got this far. Yeah.
You're in London now, and you're, 17, 18 years old. You started rhyming, but then you came in and killed it.
Well, I had an advantage because between 16 and 21, I was in sound system culture. And sound system culture is at that time was a weekly thing. And it was like, it's a lifestyle. It's not like, oh, I'm kind of in the sound, I'm kind of not in the sound. You're like, you're in or you're not. And so at that time in like Britain, there weren't many places for black culture to celebrate itself. You had like Carnival, that's a once a year thing. Or you can find a church hall, get some oversized speaker boxes, get some amplification, and you could basically revisit your mum's womb because it was just so warm and friendly. And then you could like battle other MCs. So I was in a crew from South London, from Battersea. We were called Genesis.
Was that with Mello as well?
No, Mello was like a hip hop guy.
Yeah.
So I met Mello or Michael Henry at York Gardens Community Centre in Battersea, and I remember me being like a reggae guy or a sound guy, and him being like a kind of soul boy. We used to call them soul boys. Yeah. And soul boys, they did all that like go Covent Garden, spin on their head. They had Jerry curl. They had like all this like American clothes, and they liked American culture. For some people, it was much more important to like hear the music of the Caribbean or Africa or whatever. So we would go into these spaces, bring out our speaker boxes, and we would play music of the Caribbean. And you basically get to be Caribbean for that 3 hours. There was a sound system called Saxon.
Yeah.
And I think to this day, they probably had the best lyricists the United Kingdom has ever seen. I'm talking like Shakespearean level bars, like bars for days. And then there were like 9 of them, 9 NCs, and it was like Smiler Culture, Levi. Bro, they were terrible. And then what was nice about Saxon were that they were black British MCs. They weren't MCs trying to be Jamaican. They were being British. So they would sing about stuff here and what it's like to be here. That was like one turning point. And then I remember hearing Back to the Old School was an album by an artist called Just Ice. Yeah, and just before that was another album called Criminal Minded by Boogie Down Productions. And then all of a sudden, sound system and hip hop culture sounded the same to me. Those were like my gateway records into like and so at that point, I'm 22, you know, because I came to Britain when I was 16, and by the time I was 18, I was living by myself.
Marga came to my flat one time. I met him, and like I've said so many times, that guy's production skills was just next level. Because what he was doing with drums, like I don't know anyone who's put like 742 snares in one bar and made it work. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it was literally like that. So, I love that guy. But you guys really complemented each other really well. Yeah. So was it because you had a tight friendship that brought that out? Was it just because he was a good producer and he could have done that with anybody? What was it?
Our friendship developed, but initially it was because he's a great producer. And he knows music. So there were things that he was doing that even I didn't understand. And there were things he was asking me to do lyrically that I didn't understand, you know. And even sometimes he would rewrite my verses. He'd be like, no, don't say this, say that. When we go in studio, say we go in studio tomorrow, Marga brings a list. And he goes, yeah, so from 1 to 120 we're laying snares, from 140 to da-da-da-da, from 210 to 215 you're doing your lyrics, and then 215 to 220 you're doing like your backups, and then at 230 you're finished. and so we would go into the studio and we get 3 songs done. So you got a day for 1 song, and a day is basically 8 hours. The engineer comes in, and then by 7, 8 o'clock, engineer comes in at 12, and then by 7, 8 o'clock you're out. And so you have to, anything you have to do it within that time period. And then realistically, what Marga was doing, Marga was hacking the system by having us on a rotation. So like after like 2-3 hours, either myself and the DJ had to come out the studio and leave him in the studio. And then when we were doing our bits, he would then take a break.
So now it's beginning to make sense why he had that list.
We used to call him Soldier Marga because he's on some military thing.
To my memory, you have 3 Catch 22 albums.
Yes, sir.
What was your favorite one and why?
My favorite one is probably the least popular one. It's called Nonconformist Rituals.
Okay.
Nonconformist Rituals by Catch 22 was my favorite album because it was the gateway to the sound that I then used for HKB Fin. Right. And so it was a combination of like sample material and live material put together, but then blurred so you don't know which is which. You don't know, is this a real drummer or did they sample it?
Yeah.
So that's probably my favorite. And also it's my favorite because I'll start to learn songwriting techniques where you can write a particular kind of verse that will have more engagement with the audience. So when you go live, the audience can repeat it. And so they're much more engaged with the music, more so than if you just drop in like complicated, twisty-turny bars and you're talking about stuff that several scientists need to get together to deconstruct. There was a limitation at Cold Sweat. We didn't understand the value of the type of production that you used to use. So we would hear like legends of like Tribe Called Quest in the studio for 7 days on a bass line, and we were like, whoa, that was like madness to us. Like 7 days, I could make 6 albums. So Margo would do things like he would pre-EQ the bits of the song. So the bits that he'd sampled, he'd EQ it a certain way. So by the time we got to the studio, it was kind of pre-mixed kind of thing.
Okay, so he had equipment at home that
He had bits of equipment.
The work.
And when we didn't have equipment, we would just use like techniques. So before we had a sampler, we used to do a technique called pause mixing. Because remember, we started on like, not Amstrad, on Atari ST, connected to the thing. And we on like that Steinberg program, and he got little squares and little crosses. And then Margo would be doing it for hours. He'd just, be in his house doing it. And then I'd come around and goes, I don't like this. Let's do something else.
You know, one thing that has come up recently is I've been talking to a few people, and there's always this confusion of how many members were in Hijack, how many members were in Gunshot, how many members were in Blade, right? So can you clarify for the people out there, anyone that's a fan that doesn't really know, how many actual members were there in Catch 22?
2.
That was it, just you and Margo?
It was just me and Margo.
Okay.
And then what would happen over the period, so when Catch 22 started, it was me, Margo, and DJ Brainiac. Then DJ Brainiac had like an epiphany, and he wandered off into the wilderness to walk the earth like Cain. And then we brought in KV and DJ Killerman twice.
Okay.
And then we brought in, I think I brought in Anne Gay and a singer, and Malika B, a poet. But all the major decisions were just between me and Margo. So like Anne Gay and Malika B worked under direction. DJ Brainiac was our DJ. Then when he kind of wandered off, then we got Killerman twice. And Killerman twice was a ferocious DJ. But the thing about the arts is it's very difficult to maintain a steady income when you're an artist. Yeah. So if you're not getting subsidized by someone, then there's a joke that a lot of musicians tell. Like,
how do you start off?
No, not that one.
Not that one. We're gonna tell that one as well, though.
No,
I know the joke.
Would you call a musician with no friends?
No idea.
Homeless.
There you go. But you know what? My favorite joke is, how do you become a millionaire?
Yeah.
Being a musician.
You start off as a billionaire.
That's the one. That's the one. I love that one.
I remember one time I was recording my second solo album. Album's called Acoustic Afro Hip Hop. Before I'd made the album, I'd made most of my records in dingy studios in and around London, but I wasn't getting the kind of sound that I wanted, because I'd now started to hanker for that industrial sound that you have, where like the snare sounds like a snare, the bass drum sounds like a bass drum, the voice is prominent but not overpowering. So I'm like, how can I get that? And he goes, well, you got to go out market. So I found a studio in Kingston called Gateway Studios, and I remember, which ironically is the murder capital of Britain.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That place is nice.
I know, but apparently in the evenings and the weekends, there's a lot of clapping that goes on. But anyway, applause. So anyway, not slandering Kingston because I love Kingston. But I remember I hired a studio. The studio is £60 an hour.
Okay.
And we're in there for like 10 hours. I'm recording 5 songs. And I've got drummer, bass player. I've got a harpist come in. I've got electric guitarist. I've got 3 singers come in. 3 singers, not 4. 3 singers. And a percussionist. And I have 16 violin players, 8 viola players, and a cellist. And it was just like, and everyone's coming on the same day. And because of the nature of the business at the time, everyone's getting paid cash.
Yeah.
And then I'm paying people and I'm feeding them and I'm getting people in on cabs and whatever. And at the end of it, I'm just on a bus and I'm hoping that the inspector don't get on because I've just kind of done a flip because I ain't got no more money.
I need to say something.
Yes, sir.
Right? Because this is where the entrepreneurial skills come in.
Yeah.
Right? See, what I would have done, I'd have paid everybody.
Yeah.
And then as they're leaving the studio, I'd have waited out there and robbed everybody. See?
But we're in Kingston now. And then also, like with musicians, you're going to work with them again because
Oh, so you can't kill them?
so you can't kill them, you can't jack them.
Jesus. What's wrong with the world?
It's just how it goes, man. And also, like, the thing is, we live in Britain, and this is a small island.
Did you ever feel like you were overdoing it by bringing all these people in? And
No, because with Catch 22, we made Diary of a Black Man Living in the Land of the Lost. We made Dark Tales from Two Cities. We made Nonconformist Rituals. And we made it over kind of like a 5-year period where I'd learned a lot about being an artist. So now I go to do my solo career, but the landscape has changed. And also my place in music has changed. And one of the things I used to hate when I was in Catch was you go to do a show and you're in the show and everyone there is like 22, 23, 24. And there'll be some 40-year-old brother. And you're like, whose dad is that? Whose manager is that? Why is that person here? Like part of the whole thing of hip hop was for youth to have their voice. Like, because nobody was listening to us. They'd shut down all the adventure playgrounds. There were no more youth clubs. You couldn't Cotton Road. You couldn't sit in your friend's car. You couldn't drive from here to there. You're getting pulled over. There was all this kind of institutional racism that was happening for us as black people. There was just literally the ceiling for life was very low.
And you were one of the first people to actually touch on all of that.
Sure.
What made you feel like you had to go there?
Because we'd already seen the impact of like Public Enemy and what's his name, KRS-One and JVC Force or whoever, and these people were talking truth. And then one of my favorite groups at the time was NWA, and I loved them NWA primarily because the sonic of their sound was so lush. It was like hip hop, but it was like opera. And then on top of that, the content of the lyrics, like I felt like I knew what it was like to be in Los Angeles. So it's like, how can we not make our version? Because we've got our own pressures here. We've got our own reality. When I go to do my solo stuff, I'm now the older man. I'm no longer a young 22-year-old guy. I'm 32. So why is there a 32-year-old man in this youth culture?
We were the youth. We were rebelling through our music.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're aware of that because you were doing it as well.
Yeah.
Right. But as we got older, we made hip hop also cool for the elders.
We did, yeah.
So, we took it with us. Now
Yeah.
there's 50, 60-year-olds into hip hop
True
because,
that. Because of what we did. So my thing is, in 1993, a band from Oxford called Radiohead made an album called The Bends. And for me, that was like a benchmark for me as a writer, as a performer, because the lyrics that Tom York had in like songs like Creep and I'm like, I can't do that. I'm a wicked lyricist. Yeah. How come he does more in 8 bars than I can do in 8 bars? We're better than them. Okay, we understand sound, we understand lyricism, we understand performance. I'm not having 3-4 guys from some middle class guys be better than us musically. Hell no. Yeah. So I'm gonna now draw on what I've learned. All I knew was reggae. And then I meet Marga and he's got all these like records and I'm like, where's this from? What is this beat? And then I'm starting to like learn about the culture behind the music, and it started to give me confidence. Like actually, the UK is a crossroads culture. Think of all the countries in Europe, think of all the countries in Africa, think of all the countries in the Caribbean, all the countries in South America, all the countries in North America and Central America, and all of them have representatives who live in London. Yeah, you can find every culture here. So because we can find every culture here, we have access to music that most people will never get to hear. Like if I go to Paris, they can't play some of my music because in Paris, jazz musicians only hang with jazz musicians and Latino musicians or reggae musicians, they're very separate. But in London, specifically, you got man playing reggae, samba, he's playing gospel.
It's varied.
It's varied. And that's for me, that's the benefit of living in the UK. So it's like, I also realized, I'm sorry to bring up this name, but there's this guy called Tony Blair who used to be a prime minister one time. And they had this international campaign called British Cool. And so when I was trying to get gigs, I would try and get gigs like in Brazil, like just send them an email, hey, I'm really wicked, give me a gig. And then I would mention the word British Cool and I'd get the gig. So the thing is, it's like, so that's why the music that I made as a solo artist was completely different from the Catch stuff. Okay. Because one, I didn't want to be trying to make hip hop that I was making as a youth. And two, I wanted to broaden what hip hop can actually sound like. so that when we get older, we can still listen to the music and not be on some kind of middle-age trip. Like, this is music that's relevant to us. And that's basically what my whole solo career is about.
I think you've probably done about 8 solo albums.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that was spoken word as well.
Yes.
Was it just a natural progression?
The real truth of my story is I started off in Jamaica between, say, 8 and, say, 16 doing poetry. I come to London and poetry is kind of not cool. Yeah. So I turn my poetry into toasting or emceeing in reggae culture. Then I take the toasting and the poetry into hip hop. So when I was doing Catch 22, I was basically writing poems that rhymed and using the style, whatever the cadence of the time was, I used that. Okay. But if you read it, it's just poetry. But most people, as long as it rhymed and the beat was big, no one cared. So then by the time I get to doing solo stuff, I'm like, I don't want to be a rapper because I think that's underselling my skills. And you get through more doors because, for instance, there's 12,000 jazz festivals in France every year.
So now, if you told me that years ago, I would have basically sold out hip hop and I would have become a sport. No, I'm joking.
No, but that was like a principal factor because I'm a solo artist, but not only am I a solo artist, I'm self-funded. So I have to sell these CDs, I have to sell these CDRs, I have to do these gigs because that's how I pay bills.
And at this point, your artist name is HKB Finn.
Yeah.
See, one of the things that really caught my attention about this guy here is, to this day, I think he has got the greatest artist name that has ever existed. Hunt, Kill, Bury, Finn. That's immense. That's just like, yo, next level thinking. And that's made me think I need to pay attention to this guy. And that's why I did that. I paid attention to you partly because that name was like, raw, what is this guy on?
Thank you.
If there was one of your albums that you want people to go and check out now, as in, if you mention one from Catch 22, if you mention one from HKB Finn.
For Catch 22, you should definitely check out Dark Tales from Two Cities. It was, it's an epic album, lyrically, musically. And from HKB Finn, I would say check out Natural Eloquence. It's the first time I ever made an album with my band. They just came into the studio, we did 1, 2, 3, and we did 3 versions of every song, and we just picked a version, and then that was it. We didn't add any overdubs, we didn't It's just raw.
Do you want to just say something quick about the photography?
I love photography. I've always loved photography, and once I was finally able to afford a camera, because one of the things that young people won't realize is that we grew up in an era where technology was expensive. Like just tape. I remember the one time there was this Panasonic range of cameras and the cameras were £16,000.
It makes you understand why so many artists turn to crime, innit?
Bro, telling you. Even though crime doesn't pay.
No, it doesn't.
For me, crime is the biggest like hoodwink of all time.
Yeah.
Because thing about crime is like music. Yeah. Where like your music career will last 5 minutes. But for one of those minutes, you'll be the king. Yeah. Crime, it's like you get 30 seconds. And then the rest of your time, you're in jail, or you're waiting to go jail,
or someone's looking to kill you.
Or someone's looking to kill you, or you're looking to kill someone, or it's just it's like minimum wage at best.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people how they can find out more about you and just to reach out on socials anywhere?
Find me on the social with HKBFINN, and Twitter, Instagram. I'm on Tumblr. I think I'm the last person on Tumblr. I'm about to turn the lights off, but yeah. And if you're interested in my photography or filmmaking, check out justjazz.com. No, justjazzvisuals.com.
The knowledge this guy has on the music is just on next level. He's taken things to a whole different level where he's got like tons of musicians in. Like you see, something that most people that do hip hop, where they work with samplers and turntables and stuff, dream about. But this guy has done it. Yeah? Then he's evolved himself from being a rapper to being a spoken word artist. He's moved on to other things, artistic and creative, photography, so, filmmaking and stuff like that. So make sure you check out HKB Finn. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you, man. Respect to everyone for checking this out. 521, it's the future. See you soon.